Hey everybody, my name's Lynn Hayes. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to another week's astrological forecast. This week's forecast is for the week of June 14th to the 21st, 2020. I'll be covering Mercury retrograde. I'll be covering Neptune retrograde. I'll be covering Venus, which has changed direction and will be traveling direct. We'll be covering the eclipse on the 21st, which is going to be quite significant, and I'm sure we'll talk about it next week. But eclipse energies start to build a few days before, 4 or 5 days before, so I'd like you to be prepared and ready for that. So I want to start by talking about the retrogrades, and I know for some of you who have been listening every week, this is all old hat for you, and I will link a video that I did on this subject in the description box if you'd like more information. But this whole year, between June and October, the middle of October, and probably that will sort of filter into November, there are going to be between 4 and 7 retrograde planets. That's a tremendous number. If you think about the fact that 3 planets retrograde is an average number. It's very rare to have no planets retrograde or 1 planet retrograde, but it's even more rare to have 6 and 7 planets retrograde, which is what we have coming up. So currently we have Venus, Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter all traveling retrograde. Mercury will turn retrograde on the 18th, which is in this coming week. So most of us are familiar with the idea of Mercury retrograde. It has gotten a lot of buzz. I like to say it's the pumpkin spice latte of astrology because everybody knows about it. It's pretty much common knowledge now, which is exciting, except there's so much misinformation about it. I have people calling to say, should I plan a trip when Mercury is retrograde? Should I sign this contract? I really need a job, but I can't sign the contract when Mercury is retrograde. And then there's 2 weeks on either side, this shadow period. What is that? 5 weeks, 4 times a year that we can't do anything? That just doesn't, that's not workable. So we have to know, what does that mean? What does it mean when the planets are retrograde? How can we work with those energies instead of having them, smack us upside the head? So that's what we're going to talk about, because right now we're starting to get into these retrograde energies in a pretty serious way. We're going to see that in the world in terms, I believe, in terms of the COVID lockdowns. A lot of people are saying, oh, we're out of quarantine, it's all over. There might be a second wave in the fall. But really, that's not what's happening. The virus is increasing, and then there's a little dip, and then it increases. And right now, it's on a pretty steady upward trajectory. So I'm a little concerned. I do believe that we should be prepared that with all this retrograde energy, that we're going to be doing a lot of looking back and a lot of redoing and a lot of fixing, a lot of reassessments, a lot of slowing down. So when a planet is retrograde, it's not actually traveling backwards. Of course, we know that planets don't move backwards, but we observe the skies astrologically from planet Earth. That's why it's not astronomically correct. It's looking at the planets from the perspective of humanity. And they look different. So sometimes they do appear to turn retrograde, just like Mercury does, and we're familiar with that. Mercury is the planet of communication and the planet of messaging, and that's why it's often said that communication goes haywire when Mercury is retrograde. But there have actually been studies done questioning whether there is more confusion and more communication glitches when Mercury is retrograde. It doesn't seem to be testable. Although in your own life, I'm sure you have a lot of anecdotal evidence for Mercury retrograde causing problems. But in any case, so right now we have 4 planets retrograde. When Mercury turns retrograde, there will be 5. Mercury has already slowed down. It's barely moving. So we are in that sort of buffer period where the retrograde has really started. So what do we do when Mercury is retrograde? The best thing is to really pay attention to communication. When a planet is retrograde, it wants our attention. It has a big presence in our life. When planets are retrograde in the natal chart, for example, those planets operate very much on a personal level. And when the planets are retrograde in the sky, they are louder. Their messaging is louder, and that's why sometimes their influence is so strongly felt. So right now, Venus is retrograde, which is causing a lot of, sort of reacquainting ourselves with friends from the past, with loved ones that we've lost touch with. Pluto is retrograde as it is for half the year, where we're really having to sort of look at our obsessions and the things that are creating conflict in our lives. Pluto is the planet of transformation. It can show where our obsessions are undermining us. We also have Saturn is retrograde, which is pointing out all of the things that we've done wrong, which might feel bad, but the point is so that we can correct them and create a life that's more functional. And because our lives are changing right now, we're not going back to the way things were. We are having to recreate a life that works better for this current reality. And Pluto is really going to help with that. And Jupiter, the planet of abundance and opportunity, is also retrograde. And it's helping us to create some new ideas. Now, Jupiter and Pluto are getting very close to the second phase of a conjunction when the two planets are fused together. That is going to culminate on June 30th, but they are only 1 degree apart right now. So that conjunction has already happened. During the first phase of the conjunction, so we have Jupiter, the planet of our ideals, our search for meaning, our philosophies, our religions, our ideology, and then Pluto, which is the darkness. It's the emergence of the truth, often very difficult truths. And when Jupiter and Pluto come together, there can be a lot of ideological conflict, I think is the mildest way that we can say that. So during the first phase of this, we had the first phase of the lockdown. Then we started having a lot of people come up and sort of, come out against wearing masks, and the whole health, public health situation has become a political battlefield. I don't want to get into the politics today, and I'd like to keep them out of the comments as well. But the second phase, which is pretty much right now, those two planets are within 1 degree, that's going to culminate on the 30th, there's likely to be a great deal of conflict. Typically, when we're not in a pandemic, this often manifests as religious conflict or political conflict where ideologies are clashing. We certainly are seeing plenty of politics, but we're also in a situation right now where the murder of innocent Black people is being highlighted, and the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction is certainly helping with that. So in any case, back to the retrogrades, we do have two planets changing direction, one this week, one and then two the following week. So Mercury is turning retrograde, as I said. Neptune is going to be turning retrograde on the 23rd. When a big, slow-moving planet like Neptune changes direction, it's kind of like if you have a huge semi-tractor trailer trying to make a U-turn. It takes a long time trying to make that turn. It's pretty much in one place as it tries to navigate. So we see that with Neptune retrograde. Neptune is also pretty much stationary in the sky. When a planet is stationary, it's like a laser beam of energy. And Neptune is a planet that inspires us to transcend the mundane world. And sometimes this can be blissful, sometimes it can be creative, sometimes it can bring spiritual wisdom and enlightenment, and sometimes it can just bring confusion. it can make things very unclear. It can make it difficult to know which way to go. And I feel like that's where we are right now. And Neptune is also associated with viruses, especially mysterious illnesses is a big domain of Neptune. And this COVID-19 is very mysterious. Nobody can really figure out how is it transmitted and where did it come from. It's just completely surrounded and cloaked in mystery. So Neptune's going to be retrograde for quite some time, as it is every year. That in itself is not such a big deal. But while Neptune is changing direction, which is pretty much from now for the next couple of weeks, don't be surprised to see a lot of this sort of pea soup fog in the world, not really knowing which way is up. Now we can deal with those energies if we understand what's underpinning them. Then we can say, there's a lot of retrogrades. We have Neptune and Mercury both, well, Neptune about to turn retrograde, Mercury about to turn retrograde. There's going to be some confusion. Just prepare for that. Just know there's going to be glitches. When you have a glitch, you'll be, I was expecting this. It's not a big deal. Well, it might be a big deal, but at least we knew it was coming, which I feel makes it a lot easier. So, other things going on this week. We have some very nice harmonious Mars energies. Last week we had stressful Mars conflicting with Neptune and with the Sun, and Mars is the planet of drive and desire and aggression, and so there could have been a lot of frustration and, irritation last week. This week, Mars settles down and harmonizes with Jupiter and Pluto in a sextile, which is a harmonious, supportive aspect. So that's going to be really nice, and that's going to be locked into the chart of the eclipse that we have coming up on the 21st. Now, this eclipse is particularly intense because the eclipse itself is at the new moon at 0 degrees Cancer. 0 degrees Cancer marks the first day of spring, which is also the summer solstice. So the actual solstice point is 0 degrees Cancer. When there's an eclipse on a solstice or equinox point, it's a powerful portal of energy that can change the way the next quarter, sort of the experiences that we have over the next quarter. So it's a good idea to kind of be aware of this, especially if it touches anything significant in your chart. It'll be opposite my Mars, so I'm really excited to see, air quotes, excited to see what's going to happen. But in any case, the eclipse, the sun and moon at 0 degrees are very close to the North Node. Now the North Node, because it moves backwards, was in Cancer, and it just moved back into Gemini. So there's been a shift there, and as the sun and the moon collide, they cross the North Node point, stimulating. So the North Node, I like to think of it as a gatepost to our future, or a signpost to our future. It points to the direction that we are meant to go in. So the sun passes the North Node, triggering this portal of energy to propel us towards our future destiny, whether it's exactly what we want or not. And then the moon follows as it transits the North Node. So an eclipse happens, and I've talked about this many times before, but an eclipse happens when the sun and moon are in an exact or a close alignment with the nodes of the moon. And because the nodes of the moon have this quality of destiny or fate, there is a somewhat of a fated quality to an eclipse that can bring up some issues that we need to face before we can move forward in our journey. We had an eclipse at the full moon 2 weeks ago, and there's the third of a series of eclipses, the final in the series, will be at the full moon in 2 weeks. But this is the new moon in Cancer, so this is a time to assess, who is my tribe? Where is my home? What do I need to feel that security? How can I improve the way I connect to my deepest self, my deepest needs? Do I even know what those are? Those are questions that will be asked for this eclipse. There are some interesting alignments that are part of the eclipse chart. One is this very nice Mars sextile that I talked about before. We also have Saturn in an awkward quincunx, which is a 150-degree angle, to the North Node. And Saturn is the celestial teacher. When Saturn aspects anything, we have to learn something. And Saturn is triggering the North Node here in an awkward aspect that brings up something for us to look at, but doesn't offer a solution, leaving us a little uncomfortable. Well, okay, here is this problem. What do I do about it? There's not an answer to that question. There's not an immediate answer to the question. Sometimes the questions have to be asked before the answer can be known, and that's what we have going on here. There's also a very wide, meaning far apart, square from Chiron to the new moon. It's 9 degrees apart. That's a little far to really consider, but I'm going to probably consider it anyway. It just suggests Chiron being the planet of wounding and healing. There's a suggestion here that an old wound could be opened up here, could be brought to view. An eclipse is said to unmask something that's been hidden. And let's look at this as a very good time to become aware of patterns and thoughts and ideas and relationships and goals and wishes that are standing in our way, so that we can release those, we can do a course correction, and we can move more fully into a more joyful and integrated future. So I think that's a great note to end on. I really appreciate your joining me, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again. Bye.